Hello to everyone today and welcome to ThinkStep's webinar on new EU WEEE batteries and packaging recycling options for overseas manufacturers and how companies can minimise their product recycling fees in Europe. Just before we start, to let you know that time permitting, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation by typing them into your webinar toolbox. Please just bear in mind that we have nearly 100 companies attending this webinar, so we'll try and answer as many questions as time allows at the end of the presentation. If there are any unanswered questions, we'll obviously endeavour to provide our answers to the participants at an appropriate opportunity after the webinar. Also to let you know that a recording of the webinar will be available on ThinkStep's EC4P website in the coming days. Okay, so some quick introductions. Who do we have speaking today? Well, my name's Howard Stimpson and I'm Operations Director at ThinkStep's Recycling Compliance Business Unit. I've been providing expert consulting to manufacturers on EU and rest of the world WEEE batteries, packaging and RoHS compliance for the last 14 years and have helped many hundreds of manufacturers in this time to understand their producer responsibility, legal exposure, and then help them to implement robust compliance strategies for product sales. I'm also joined today by my colleague James Pearson, Product Director at ThinkStep, and during today's webinar we'll be demonstrating our unique web reporting tool, Environmental Compliance for Products, or EC4P. Now, EC4P has been developed to allow companies to guarantee their WEEE batteries and packaging compliance across the world, including Europe. Okay, so to give you an overview of today's webinar, well, firstly, I'll give a brief introduction about my company ThinkStep and give you some information about who we are, our managed WEEE batteries and packaging compliance services, and our industry experience over the last 15 years. Then I'll provide a review of the WEEE directive and in particular the producer compliance requirements for overseas distance sellers of electrical and electronic equipment. We'll then take a high-level look at the compliance requirements of the EU packaging and batteries directives. And then I'd like to spend some time to discuss the recasts of the EU Waste Framework Directive and Packaging Directive, and in particular, some of the changes to these directives to implement the EU Circular Economy package measures. Now, this includes the extension of producer compliance options for overseas distance sellers, and the introduction of modulated recycling fees to reflect the durability, repairability, reusability and recyclability of packaging items. We'll then take a deep dive into how companies can minimise their WEEE and packaging recycling fees using our experiences of WEEE and packaging in Italy and France as real case studies. I'll then be able to pass you over to my colleague James, who will demonstrate how ThinkStep's web reporting tool EC4P is used by manufacturers to report equipment, batteries and packaging sales data to the correct reporting categories in each country. And of course, as I've said, there should be opportunity at the end to answer questions which have been posted into the webinar toolbox. Okay, so a little information about ThinkStep. Well, for those of you who have not heard of ThinkStep before, we're a global sustainability software consultancy with 250 sustainability experts deployed across 19 countries, serving more than 2,000 companies. That includes 40% of the global Fortune 500 relying on a compliance software solution provided by ThinkStep. And along with the ThinkStep's EC4P recycling compliance services and our BombCheck web database to manage lists of restricted and declarable substances, you probably will have heard of ThinkStep for its lifecycle analysis software Garby and its enterprise sustainability performance software for EHS, energy and carbon management reporting called SOFI. Now, our modular solutions for product compliance management integrate with Siemens product lifecycle management software Teamcenter to enable design for compliance across the entire product lifecycle. If you didn't know, Siemens Teamcenter is the most widely used PLM system in the world. Managing compliance within Teamcenter enables companies to integrate environmental data with their product data at each phase of the product development process, whilst at the same time being able to leverage key PLM capabilities. Now, this integrated approach with Siemens Teamcenter leads right through to the product end of life and compliance management with global WEEE batches and packaging recycling using ThinkStep's EC4P platform, which we'll be demonstrating today. Now, from our office in the southwest UK, we provide our full range of managed WEEE batches and packaging outsourced services to ensure companies meet their obligation for producer registration, take-back, recycling and reporting. Our industry experience in the field of producer responsibility, and specifically WEEE and RoS, dates back to 2003, when we wrote the UK government guidelines for RoS and WEEE. In 2005, we launched our pan-European web-based WEEE compliance services to assist manufacturers of professional use equipment to manage their WEEE collection and recycling arrangements. In 2007, we were the first organisation in the UK to gain authorisation from the government to operate a licensed producer compliance scheme for WEEE, and that's known as B2B WEEE scheme. In 2009, we launched our managed services to integrate WEEE batteries and packaging compliance, and this extended in 2013 to also cover rest of the world countries which had implemented their own extended producer responsibility legislation. And then in 2014, we developed and launched our web tool EC4P for manufacturers to gather and manage their WEEE batteries and packaging compliance reporting data across the globe. Okay, so with the introductions over, let's move on to the main topics of discussion today, starting with the WEEE Directive. Well, the WEEE Directive requires producers to register and provide for financing and collection of recycling of WEEE and then report WEEE compliance data. And as an environmental directive, there are differences in how it's implemented and enforced across member states, and it applies the first time a product is placed on the market in each EU member state. Now, importantly, under the WEEE Directive, your company is classed as a producer if you're located in the member state and you manufacture and sell equipment under your own brand in that member state, if you're located in the member state and you resell equipment under your own brand, if you're located in the member state and you import and sell another company's branded equipment, and also now under the WEEE recast, if you sell equipment by means of distance communication directly to end users in the member state and you're located in another country. If you're classed as a WEEE producer in a particular member state, then your company must meet certain compliance obligations, and that includes the compliance requirements specific to that member state. So this means you need to register with the WEEE regulatory authority or compliance scheme in that member state. You have to finance collection and transport of waste products to an approved WEEE recycler, and you have to report tons of new products sold in that country. You must also meet the single market provisions of the directive, so those that apply equally across all EU member states. That includes ensuring products are marked with the crossed out wheelie bin symbol, and also providing product recycling instructions to disassembly facilities if that's requested by them. Now, Article 17 of the WEEE Directive specifically states that member states must allow a manufacturer based in another member state to appoint an authorised representative located in its country to manage WEEE compliance for all product sales. So as a result, there's now no need to rely on individual importing distributors to manage WEEE compliance for the products that it imports and sells, and a single WEEE registration by a manufacturer's authorised representative can cover all products imported by all distributors into that member state. Now, all EU countries have implemented Article 17, and in fact, in a number of member states, manufacturers based in any country, even those outside Europe, can now appoint an authorised representative located in a particular member state to manage WEEE compliance for all product sales. And we even find in a small number of countries, direct registration is even possible, which means there's no need to appoint an authorised representative in that country, and you simply register your business as a WEEE producer using your overseas business address. So by appointing an authorised representative in a particular country, the authorised representative takes on the legal responsibility for all aspects of WEEE producer compliance. So the authorised representative must ensure that the products are marked with a crossed out wheelie bin symbol. They have to register with the correct WEEE regulatory authority or compliance scheme. They must also report the tons of new products sold in that country and ensure waste product collection, transport and recycling complies with the WEEE regulations in that country and meets WEEE directive targets. They have to pay the registration and recycling fees on behalf of the manufacturer and provide product recycling instructions to disassembly facilities if that's requested by them. They also have to accept any prosecutions on behalf of the manufacturer in the event of non-compliance. Okay, so we've had a look at the WEEE directive. Now let's take a look at some of the compliance requirements under the EU Packaging Directive and EU Batteries Directive. Well, like the WEEE Directive, the Packaging Directive and Batteries Directive make the producer responsible for providing suitable registration, collection, recycling and reporting arrangements in EU member states. Under the Batteries Directive, if you place a battery, and that includes batteries incorporated to electronic products or vehicles, on a member state market for the first time, you're classed as a batteries producer in that particular country. Under the Packaging Directive, if you place packaging, and that includes packaging used around products, on a member state market for the first time, you're classed as a packaging producer in that particular country. And a packaging producer includes suppliers of packaging materials, packaging manufacturers and converters, fillers and users of packaging, packaging importers, and traders and distributors of packaging. In each EU member state, the packaging producer and the batteries producer must register with the correct regulatory authority and then finance the costs of packaging and batteries collection and recycling accordingly. The packaging and batteries producer must also report the quantity of packaging and batteries it places on that particular member state market in a particular reporting period. Again, the batteries and packaging directives are environmental directives, and therefore there are differences in how they're implemented into each EU member state regulations. In practice, almost all packaging and batteries producers join a packaging or batteries compliance scheme in that particular country in order to register as a producer and then to be able to finance the costs of collection and recycling and to report the quantity of packaging and batteries it places on that particular member state market. The producer in turn then pays a packaging and batteries recycling fee to the scheme based on their calculated packaging and batteries obligation. And this fee takes into account the quantity and type of packaging and batteries sold. And now, as we will see for packaging, as this webinar will explore today, how easy the packaging is to recycle. The directive, like the WEEE directive, also includes some single market provisions which apply equally across EU member states regarding the packaging and batteries substance restrictions and labelling requirements. For packaging, we have provisions under the Packaging Directive essential requirements concerning the use of materials which allow packaging reuse and recovery. And under the Batteries Directive, Article 11 of the Batteries Directive also places obligations on the manufacturers to design products to allow for battery removability. Okay, so we've already discussed that the WEEE, batteries and packaging directives are environmental directives and therefore are different in how they're being implemented into EU member state regulations. So to highlight this, let's consider how distance selling from an overseas country directly to an end user in an example EU member state is currently obligated. And we've got 5 example countries here: Austria, Bulgaria, France, Germany, and UK. As we've covered distance selling under the WEEE directive, that's now a specifically obligated producer activity. Therefore, any company who sells directly to the end user from an office in another country will be classed as the WEEE producer in that destination country. So in these example countries, and in fact plus in all other EU member states, distance selling from one country directly to the end user in an EU member state means you're classed as a WEEE producer in that destination country of sale. However, under the batteries and packaging directives, distance selling from one country directly to an end user in an EU member state is not specifically mentioned in the directives. So what this means is that EU member states have differing interpretations of whether selling in this way is classed as placing on the market. So using these country examples, in fact, only in Germany, if your company sells directly to the end user from an office in another country, will you be classed as the packaging producer in that destination country. And likewise for batteries, only in Bulgaria and Germany, and then France as well, if your products are consumer products, will your company be classed as a batteries producer when selling directly to end users in these countries from an office in another country. Now I'd like to spend a few minutes to cover recent important amendments made to the EU Waste Framework Directive and also recently to the Packaging Waste Directive. And now these are important changes which influence how packaging producers who distance sell from one country to another are being redefined, as well as how packaging recycling fees are being impacted. So amendments to the Waste Framework Directive to implement the EU Circular Economy Package were adopted on the 30th of May this year. Our member states must transpose this into national law by July 2020. The Circular Economy Package recognises that products and the materials they contain have value, unlike in the traditional linear economy model, which is based on take, make, consume, throw away pattern. A circular economy aims to reduce waste to a minimum as well as reuse, repair, refurbish and recycle existing valuable materials and products. Now the amendments set reuse and recycling targets for municipal waste, and that includes packaging waste, to be met by 2025 and 2030. Importantly, from an extended producer responsibility perspective as well, these amendments include overall minimum requirements that producer compliance schemes need to adhere to. The amendments also introduce the concept that compliance scheme recycling fees should be lower for easier to recycle and recover products, or higher for harder to recycle and recover products. Now, whilst extended producer responsibility schemes for packaging already exist in almost all EU member states, there are significant differences in the way that each scheme operates, as well as the scope of packaging covered and in the level of responsibility they adopt on behalf of the packaging producer. The amended Packaging Waste Directive requires that by the 31st of December 2024, extended producer responsibility schemes, so packaging compliance schemes, are established for all packaging materials, and that all schemes operate to common minimum requirements, which are laid out in the Waste Framework Directive. Now, these include the packaging recycling fees being charged by compliance schemes needing to be modulated where possible, and this takes into account the product durability, repairability, reusability and recyclability, as well as the presence of hazardous substances. This means that companies can soon expect to see packaging recycling fees charged by compliance schemes to be lower for packaging, which has a lower environmental impact. We also see that the amended Packaging Directive makes it a requirement that member states must allow producers of products established in another member state to appoint an authorised representative located in its country to manage packaging compliance for all product sales. And this, in fact, is a very similar requirement to what we now already see with the WEEE Directive. Now, as a result, packaging compliance schemes will need to accept overseas companies that distance sell into that particular country as members. So we've traditionally seen variations in EU member states classifying overseas distance selling directly to end users into their country as a producer obligated activity. However, the new general minimum requirements for EPR schemes in the amended packaging directive means that we can now expect to see packaging compliance schemes allowing overseas companies who distance sell to be able to register in that particular country. So this in effect will mean that EU member state packaging regulations are likely to require overseas companies who distance sell to register in the sales destination country. And perhaps this would also mean that the batteries regulations in each EU member state could be expected to follow suit at a later time. Okay, so we've taken a high-level look at WEEE batteries and packaging producer obligations and some of these new changes being brought in by the amended Waste Framework Directive and the amended Packaging Directive. Now I'd like to take a deep dive into particular countries' EPR regulations and how companies are able to minimise their recycling fees. So starting with packaging compliance in Italy. Well, in Italy, packaging producers are responsible for paying for take-back of used packaging and the collection of packaging waste. The local authority costs for the separate collection of packaging waste, any reuse of reused packaging, and the recycling, recovery and disposal of packaging waste. Now, purely from a practical perspective, there is really only one compliance option for packaging producers in Italy, and that's to join the sole packaging compliance scheme CONAI. Now, CONAI's packaging recycling fees are based on the type of packaging being placed on the market in Italy, and it takes into account the packaging material type and whether this packaging is sales or transport packaging. From 2018, CONAI's recycling fees for plastics have also been modulated into 3 pricing bands to take account of the packaging's end user, so packaging going to a professional end user or a consumer end user. And importantly, it also takes into account the recyclability of the packaging being placed on the market in Italy. In 2019, the modulated fees are also going to be extended to paper-based packaging. So you can see that using the 2019 recycling fees for plastics here as an example, if your company is selling professional use products into Italy and the packaging you use for your products is classed as recyclable, your packaging recycling fee to CONAI will be €150 per tonne of plastic packaging you place on the market, compared to €369 per tonne if you choose to use a non-recyclable packaging. In addition to the modulated fees, depending on the recyclability of the packaging materials, if your company is involved in importing packaged products into Italy, then there are actually 2 simplified methods available to you to calculate your packaging recycling fees. You can choose to pay a flat rate based on the purchase value of the packed goods and imported into Italy. That's by discounting the VAT and transportation costs. And for non-food goods, the recycling fee is currently calculated at 0.06% of the value of the imported products. Alternatively, the second method, you can decide to calculate the packaging fee based on the total weight of the packaging imported with the products. And in this calculation, the recycling fee for non-food goods is €52 per tonne of imported packaging. Now, under the packaging regulations in Italy, producers who join CONAI have to report the previous 10 years of packaging placed on the market in Italy and pay an environmental contribution for each year. For companies using one of the simplified methods we've just discussed to calculate their backdated recycling fees, we've listed the fee calculation figures here for each year. So the manufacturer in question make professional use equipment and import products into Italy for sale to end users. And what we'll do now is have a look at an actual case study to see how we helped a manufacturer to reduce its recycling fee to CONAI by using an alternative calculation method. So the manufacturer in question, well, they make professional use equipment and import the products into Italy for sale to end users. And they've been importing the products into Italy since 2009. The manufacturer registered as a packaging producer in Italy in 2016 by joining CONAI. And as part of that registration process and under the packaging laws in Italy, the manufacturer needed to declare each previous year's packaging sales, so from 2015 back to 2009, and then pay the backdated packaging recycling fees. Now, remembering the two simplified methods of calculating the packaging recycling obligation in Italy, the manufacturer originally calculated its backdated recycling obligation using method 1, the flat rate based on the purchase value of the packed goods imported into Italy. Now, the products in question, well, these are expensive medical devices. So when the manufacturer used this calculation method, the total packaging obligation for 2009 to 2015 worked out at a total packaging recycling obligation of €49,000. Now, once the manufacturer had recovered from this shock, well, they decided to contact ThinkStep for a proposal to manage packaging compliance in Italy and to see where we could reduce their backdated sales costs. So we first reviewed the manufacturer's packaging sales for 2015, and using this 2015 packaging data and the previous year's total value of imports, we extrapolated the packaging weights for each year from 2009 to 2014. We then used the 2009 to 2014 packaging weight data to recalculate the backdated recycling obligation using method 2 under that simplified calculation, so the total weight of packaging imported for that particular year. Now, by using this alternative method, we were able to reduce the total packaging obligation for the client for 2009 to 2015 down to €19,000, so a saving of €30,000 for this client. And needless to say, they were quite happy with that result. Okay, so the other country we'd like to look at in today's webinar is France, and how companies can minimise the costs of authorised representatives for overseas producers when achieving WEEE compliance in France. So in France, we currently have two main operational WEEE compliance schemes, and that's Ecologic and ESR, and they cover the WEEE categories featured in this table here. Now, these are based on the old product reporting categories, not the open scope reporting categories, which will be taking effect in France for reporting purposes from January 2019. Now, if your company is selling directly to the end user in France through distance selling from an office in another country, or if your company is wanting to take over WEEE compliance on behalf of your French-based distributors, well, you need to appoint an authorised representative in France to complete your producer registration, collection, recycling and reporting obligations. Now, third-party authorised representatives in France are expensive. We've outlined here some of the typical fees you can expect to pay if appointing a third-party authorised representative to achieve WEEE compliance in France. Now, not including any actual WEEE recycling fees, which have to be paid to the WEEE compliance scheme, you can expect to pay anything up to around €7,000 per year to appoint an authorised representative in France to manage WEEE compliance. So is there another way which has lower cost? Well, yes, I'm pleased to say that there is in France. So the compliance scheme Ecologic actually provides a free of charge authorised representative service to its members. So for example, If your company sells any type of household use equipment, with the exception of lighting equipment, into France, then you can join Ecologic to meet your WEEE producer obligations in France and use Ecologic's free authorised representative service. Okay, so we've outlined a couple of ways in which we've helped companies to lower their compliance fees in selected EU member states. So how else does EC4P help companies to navigate through the different compliance requirements and in each country, and therefore ultimately avoid any potential WEEE batteries and packaging producer enforcement action? Well, if your company already has existing WEEE batteries or packaging compliance arrangements in place, we can audit such arrangements to advise whether you're getting best value at lowest cost in each country. And then we can assist to upgrade any compliance arrangements if we determine that there are gaps in your compliance. If you have no compliance arrangements already in place, then our team of compliance experts will be able to assess your company's legal obligations based on your product sales and types of products you sell, and then provide robust compliance strategies to manage WEEE batteries and packaging compliance in all 28 EU member states, EFTA countries, as well as non-European countries as well that have implemented their own extended producer responsibility type legislation. We then help your company to implement these WEEE batteries and packaging compliance arrangements in each country, and this includes calculating your company's WEEE batteries packaging recycling obligations and recommending the most cost-effective and reliable compliance schemes for WEEE batteries and packaging in each country. And what we do is calculate and compare the registration and recycling fees you would pay by joining different compliance schemes in each country. We then manage the whole process of maintaining these WEEE batteries and packaging compliance arrangements, including submitting updated producer registration and reporting sales through ThinkStep's web reporting tool EC4P, and if appropriate, pay registration and recycling fees on your behalf. And we then simply invoice you for that cost for these fees. Now, we monitor WEEE batteries and packaging compliance schemes and their associated fees across Europe as well as in non-European countries to ensure that your company gets the best value for your compliance arrangements. We help you choose the most suitable recycling scheme for your products and sales arrangements. So, for example, only a handful of compliance schemes across Europe can provide compliance services for all three categories of WEEE batteries and packaging. Now, you'd have heard me mention EC4P a number of times already today. So what I'd like to do now is pass you over to my colleague James to give you a demonstration of how EC4P is being used by manufacturers to gather and manage WEEE batteries and packaging sales data in order to guarantee their compliance with WEEE batteries and packaging reporting obligations across the globe.